Hello and welcome to the ongoing special transmission on US elections. Viewers, if you remember the day, 4th of November, when it was, when actually results started trickling in, and at that time, for a moment or for a heartbeat, it felt that Donald Trump is going to win a second election. Remember, since 1992, no sitting president has lost a second term, but this seems to be a different case. We know that while there was a disparity between the direct votes that were cast on the election day and postal ballots because of the COVID-19. So this disparity actually also reflected in counting methods. In certain states, it seemed that Donald Trump is winning and then postal ballots were counted. On the other side, there were states where exactly opposite happened. So consequently, there were 4 or 5 states which were still counting votes because there is an unprecedented turnout this time. It has never, there hasn't been this kind of turnout in a century. So the states that we are talking about: Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and North Carolina. Amazingly, when you put them all together, then you get a route or a path for President Trump. But out of 4 out of these 5 states, we know that Joe Biden, former vice president, is actually leading now. And we saw overnight, first Georgia was flipped from red to blue, and then we saw Pennsylvania also flipping to from red to blue. And since then, a lot of things have happened. Right now, nobody has actually called the elections in favor of Joe Biden, but it seems all but a done deal that Pennsylvania, since it has 20 votes, electoral votes, and he already has 253, so he very comfortably crosses the minimum limit, that is 270. We are going to talk about this. It seems that Joe Biden is now going to be the president of United States. Of course, there is a possibility of pushback. President Donald Trump has issued a statement in which it has been said that he is going to challenge the count in all 4. But we still have to wait and see what exactly becomes of that. At this moment, it seems that within a couple of hours, when Pennsylvania gets a comfortable majority, then Joe Biden will be declared winner. In order to help us understand these issues, in order to help discuss these matters, we are joined by one guest in the studio and 2 guests on Skype as well. Let me introduce the guest in the studio. Ahmed Jawad Saab, National Spokesman and Information Secretary of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, the ruling party in Pakistan. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. And on Skype, we are joined by Athar Tiramzi, who is National Director, Pakistanis for Biden National Council. Tiramzi Saab, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. And Aisha Tanzim also joins us, Bureau Chief, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Voice of America. Thank you very much, Aisha, for being part of the program as well. Let me start with the studio guest, Ahmed Jawad Saab. At this moment, of course, you are a political party's spokesman as well. But let me ask you, do you think that there is, do you see a chance of disruption at this moment, or things are going to go comfortably?
Farooq, first of all,
as a student of history, you have to tell me that.
First of all, I'm happy because I had predicted Joe Biden winning the election almost 3 days ago. And now regarding the disruption or the impact of the result on Pakistan or the world, I think as far as disruption is considered, I don't think so there will be any serious disruption as it is being predicted that this time the elections may turn into a civil war. You know, the analysts and the experts around the world are predicting. There are videos on the social media that somebody is doing a firing exercise. I don't think so.
Right.
And the reason is that America, despite all the challenges, whether it is with the black people, whether it is the civil and police and public, various unpleasant clashes, still there is a system. There is a rule of law. There is a system which is working, and people have that democratic thought process.
Right. America is an entrenched, institutionalized democracy, and that's why it is so.
Yeah.
But you said you predicted this thing, you called this election three days ago. Was it merely calling the election or betting also?
No, there was no betting.
No, of course.
But I could see.
Yeah.
So I sometimes
let me bring
see
in,
things in advance.
Right. Let me bring in Athar Tirmzi. Athar Saab, thank you very much once again for joining us. Let me ask you very straightforwardly. At this moment, we are looking at 4 or 5 networks of the US television networks. None of them seems ready to call this election in favor of Joseph Biden. Do you think that it is going to happen today?
Yeah, I think I like to say Juma Mubarak, and I think it'll happen after Juma prayer. Campaign actually on Monday, the day before election, we are having daily briefing meetings and debriefing meetings at the end of the night. And on Monday, campaign actually called us and said that do it, but we are thinking that results may be finalized sometime in later afternoon on Friday. So campaign going in knew that because of the large dump in in Pennsylvania, where the Republican legislature refused the Board of Election to count the ballots before the election day, Biden campaign knew that unfortunately, because the Republican Party had refused, is going to be a little bit of a lag in counting those votes. They were coming mostly from the Democrats, and there were about 2.5 million mail-in ballots. So campaign knew that it's not going to be until Friday. So campaign hasn't announced anything, but we are very confident that by this afternoon, late afternoon, we'll have a announce in the victory column that we have won the election.
Do you have any idea about the number at this moment? When we started this program, the lead was somewhere around 6,000 votes, right? And it is said that something like 50-60,000 votes at least before even postal ballots are going to be counted. Do you think that you will be in a position once that difference reaches somewhere around 40-50,000 votes?
Absolutely. I think both Pennsylvania and Georgia, we will have a comfortable lead to declare a victory margin, because I think we'll go above that 1 percentage point. And that automatic recount has to be within 0.05%.
Right.
So I think we are very comfortable because there are a large number as of
in Georgia,
yes,
perhaps there is going to be a recount, but in Pennsylvania, the pundits seem more confident. Let me bring in Aisha Tanzim. Aisha, thank you very much for being part of the program. Let me ask you, regarding the possibility of a pushback, we have seen a statement coming from President Trump, and in that it seems clear that they are going to actually go for a review or some kind of appeal. But we are also hearing these murmurs about possibility of some kind of physical pushback by the base of the president. Do you think that that is a possibility?
Thank you so much for having me, Farooq. First of all, let me clarify that whatever I say here is my personal opinion and has nothing to do with the Voice of America, just in case someone's wondering. Now, as for pushback, there will be several legal challenges, some of which have already been filed by the Republican Party. At least 2 have already been dismissed by the courts, but there will be more. There will be requests for recounts. There will be legal challenges on the process. As for physical pushback, we have seen a little bit of that in various states, both in Arizona and Pennsylvania. We've seen President Trump supporters gather outside the places where votes are being counted. In some places, police had to be called just to make sure there wasn't a law and order situation. But they're asking for different things in different states. So, for example, in Pennsylvania, before former Vice President Joe Biden took the lead, Trump supporters were asking for the vote count to stop. In Arizona, they were asking for the vote count to continue. So they're asking for different things. As for physical pushback, we've seen a little bit of it, but none of it yet has turned into a big law and order situation. There was one incident that the police is investigating where they suspected somebody was trying to attack one of the places where votes are being counted, but so far everything seems to be under control. Most of the protests have been peaceful.
Right. Aisha, can you give us some kind of timeline also if one of the networks calls it today or for that matter actually Pennsylvania declares that result, how soon are we going to see certification and formal announcement by the authorities? And then we of course have to go for the electoral college vote as well. Can you give us some timeline regarding that?
Yes, of course. I think by the end of the day today, it seems like Pennsylvania's vote count will become much more clear and several networks might actually call it. However, as far as formal announcement is concerned, no state will do a formal announcement until every ballot is counted. They have procedures and they have to follow them. And as for the formal announcement for the president, as you said, on the 10th of December, the Electoral College will meet. They will then vote for the president. That has to be ratified by the Congress. So that is a procedural matter that nobody wants to bypass. The authorities will not bypass. As far as networks are concerned and projections are concerned, you might start seeing those in a couple of hours.
Yeah, one surprising thing so far, and it seems topsy-turvy, is that Fox has actually called Arizona in favor of Joseph Biden. But strangely enough, there seems to be something different going on there. It seems that Donald Trump in the end might win that. And Pennsylvania, where he might, Biden might win, actually is not being called. So there is some strange kind of compulsion or worry as well. Ahmed Jawad Sahab, let me ask you about the state of affairs right now. You were very optimistic, and you are very optimistic. In fact, you actually predicted one thing, and today you are predicting another thing, that it is going to be done amicably.
Yes.
So you think that President Trump is going to concede easily, and as is being speculated in the Western media, is going to leave White House on 20th of January as well?
Farrukh, conceding defeat, yes, I think it's a difficult thing for Trump.
Right.
Considering his personality. And his not accepting defeat does not start a few days ago when the results were coming out. In fact, he started this kind of statements well before the elections.
Okay.
And he was not ready to accept that. He was sure that he has to win. And he was threatening that if the results are different, he's not going to accept, he's not going to leave the White House. So I think that is part of his personality. But at the end of the day, if 4 out of 5 states where Joe Biden is leading, if everything goes with the current trend and he wins, I think then he is winning with a good margin, which actually was looking neck to neck in last 2 days. But at the end of the race, perhaps this margin is quite good enough for Joe Biden to come out winning. And also the number of votes
Yeah.
He is already leading in that.
Yeah,
so
but,
I think
but popular votes are not that much, an indicator of what is going on.
Yeah,
Now, the fact is that both these candidates actually individually got maximum, votes in history.
Yeah.
Right, and that seems astounding. Athar Tirmidhi Sahab, I'm going to come to you, but given that Aisha Tanzim has to leave early, let me first go to her. Aisha Sahaba, now since we are talking about all these matters, let me ask you, the area where you focus, Pakistan and Afghanistan, do you think that foreign policy of Joe Biden is going to be any different from President Trump?
I think in some areas it will be the same. So when it comes to withdrawal from Afghanistan or staying in Afghanistan, I think the policy will be similar to President Trump if Joe Biden becomes the president. Although one could say that he would listen maybe more to his advisors in Pentagon. President Trump was known to disregard their advice sometimes. When it comes to some other areas, when it comes to focus on human rights, so for example in Pakistan, the pressure on media, human rights, and a lot of things where human rights activists and journalists complained that US had stopped putting pressure on the government of Pakistan or etc. Mr. Biden's policy might be slightly different than President Donald Trump. The other thing that will make a difference in this region is his policy towards Iran. He was part of President Obama's cabinet, his vice president, in fact, when President Obama signed a deal with Iran, which President Trump pulled out of. So we don't know yet whether Joe Biden will sign on again to that deal, but one could say that tensions with Iran might go down. Tensions with China might go down because President Trump really raised the temperature, started what some call a trade war with China. Joe Biden as president might actually, lower the temperature a little bit, even though US will always be competing with China right now.
Aisha, can you hear me?
Yes.
Since we are talking about the rest of the country, let me ask you about the elephant in the room, India. India, we have seen, is changing its character for past 5-6 years since Narendra Modi has become Prime Minister. And we have seen that there was a carte blanche. In fact, when Donald Trump was visiting New Delhi, there was a pogrom going on against Muslims. Do you think that even their human rights are going to matter, or they are going to be the allies and everything will be hunky-dory?
Well, there will be some mention of human rights or some emphasis on human rights, maybe even some pressure, but you have to realize that the US-India relationship is strategic and it is twofold. One is India is, US using India against China, but the other is India is a 1.3 billion population. A lot of it, more than 400 million, is middle class with buying power. I don't know the current numbers. My numbers are old, but India is not only a big market for the US, it's also a big production house for US companies. So the business interests of both countries are so intertwined that for them to totally, de-link and just focus on human rights will be very difficult for Joe Biden, especially at a time in a post-COVID world where everybody's trying to jumpstart the economy no matter what. So I think economy might take a front seat in the next year when the world is dealing with coronavirus.
This is quite surprising and fascinating also. Human rights will matter, but not in India. Human rights don't change, right? But Aisha Tanzim...
Farooq, as you know and I know as journalists, we cover the world. Around the world, human rights matter, but they always take a second seat to economy. Remember, US and Saudi Arabia after the killing of
right.
And now things are back to normal. Same with China. Human rights, a lot of people complain about it, but the economic... So yes, human rights matter as they should, but as journalists, we've seen it time and again that economic realities sometimes trump them.
Right. But of course, Aisha, I'm told that we have to thank you here. Thank you very much for being part of the program. Thank you very much for joining. But let me reiterate again, regardless of what happens, human rights remain human rights. And a job of a journalist is to actually document and report everything that happens. Let me go back to Atat Tirmizi Saab. Tirmizi Saab, let me ask you the same question. How is the foreign policy going to change? And do you think that this insistence on human rights is going to be a value that is going to be used to judge every ally, every country? Or is it going to be selective implementation of human rights?
So look, I think one big difference between President Trump and Vice President Biden is that localization of human rights. So I think it starts there. That's a starting point. When it comes to subcontinent human rights, I'll tell you what will make a difference is Pakistani American community playing a pivotal role in the United States. So I think when you talk about subcontinent human rights in the Valley of Kashmir, you will see that we have seen a surge in the United States, both from Indian Muslims, Kashmiri Muslims, and Pakistani Muslims, to engage the campaign of President Joe Biden and elected officials at the level of Congress and honing on one point agenda, and that is human rights in the Valley of Kashmir. If you go visit Joe Biden's
and absolutely, I'm going to actually pick the thread from right here. Let me ask a very quick question put to you, sir. Since we are talking about the consequence of the change of administration, and we know that Prime Minister Imran Khan and President Trump had developed this personal rapport, where actually President Trump actually said that he is going to go and converse for Prime Minister Imran Khan. Do you think that there is going to be some substantial change between the two leaders or between the two countries when it comes to relationship?
I think, Farrukh, my way of looking at the change of policy with the change of president is that if you remember the policies under George Bush and the policies under Barack Obama, there was not much difference.
Okay.
Yes, there was only one difference. That was the personality of George Bush and the personality of Barack Obama.
Okay.
Other than that, it was the same policy which was continued by Obama. And if we come to Trump and now Joe Biden, I can tell you again that it is change of personality. That Trump was bullying the world. Joe Biden may not be bullying the world.
Not was, he still is. Until January 20, he is going to be the president.
I stick to my prediction.
No, but he doesn't change today. He is going to be, although a lame duck president, he is going to be a president. I'm going to come back to you, sir. Let me welcome the third guest who joins us from the US. Professor Dr. Adil Najam Saab joins us, Dean, Boston University. Adil Najam Saab, thank you very much, sir, for joining us. It is a great pleasure having you in the show. Let me ask you about this moment in history, first of all, because at this moment it seems that very shortly the results will be declared, and there is a possibility that Joe Biden might be declared president-elect of the US within hours. So at this moment, a woman from a mixed heritage, actually from South Asia, is on the cusp of becoming the first vice president of the US. Tell me about your thoughts at this moment, sir.
So I think you are right, and it's a great pleasure to be with you. I think you're right. It is seeming that we are moving towards a Biden victory, a very slight, very narrow Biden victory. It doesn't matter even if he gets all these states and the electoral votes are larger. But a Biden victory, and in the end, that's what matters on the White House. We are looking at a Trump exit, and we have no idea how a Trump exit happens. So over the years, we have learned how U.S. presidential exits happen, and we are going to learn some things new in the next many weeks. In the past, the U.S. presidential real old past, I'm talking about the 1800s, presidential exits weren't always very pleasant. and weren't always very collegial. And this one also does not seem to be going in the way the recent presidential exits have been. So those are two things. Certainly, as you say, a vice presidential female, I think that is important. I'm not sure it's entirely historic, simply because the US has been so late in coming to the game. With so many women leaders around the world, that it is US catching up. I think, however, the election is historic, but not for these reasons. Not because Trump exits, not because Biden comes. It is important because the country is broken. And the election result, one election result is likely to be that Biden becomes president, but the other election result, which I think is as important, is that someone like Mr. Trump will have ended the election with nearly 70 million votes. Breathe that number in. 70 million people, Americans, would have voted nearly for Mr. Trump. And what that means is that US politics is and will be defined by Mr. Trump, whether he's here or not. He will define it through his tweets, he will define it through his tantrums. But he has already changed the Republican Party. And in many ways, this was Trump's election on both sides. This was Biden was a second.
Many would argue that it is Trump's world.
Yes, well, I don't know. I hope not. I hope not. I hope not. But it is certainly Trump's America in the following sense, and it was Trump's election. The election was Trump versus Trump. On the one side was Trump, and those who believe kind of in him fanatically. It doesn't matter what he does. It doesn't matter what he says. It doesn't matter what happens to COVID. It doesn't matter what happens to the economy. He's the beautiful. He is the most pleasant. He is the best words. He is the smartest. And he is it, right? There is a fanatical zeal about him. On the other hand, there is no Biden for anything. There is no Biden supporters, really. There are anti-Trump supporters. There are supporters. There are people who essentially said anyone but Trump. To use the Urdu phrase, you could have had a khamba. You could have had a can of rocks. And that would have won.
Dr. Saab, since you're talking about all these matters, and there's a lot to unpack here, particularly because you said anti-Trump voters, and that also includes his policies. It seems that there were many policies that also caused a lot of problem when it comes to the pushback. Sir, one policy that I know, because environment or climate change is an issue very close to your heart. Let me ask you, this Biden promise of rejoining the international accords on particularly Paris Accord on the first day when he comes to the White House. Do you think that it is a promise that can be fulfilled? And is it a big thing, sir?
It is a big thing, and I think it is a promise that will be fulfilled. It is one of the few ones that can be fulfilled. I do think, because this is somewhere Mr. Biden can make a big statement and a right statement. The US just officially went out of Paris. I think Biden will bring it back into Paris. I think there will be a number of environmental reversals. However, very briefly, I think on other Trump policies, Mr. Biden will find it very difficult, or much more difficult to reverse. Particularly on foreign affairs. For example, on Israel and capital in Jerusalem, I do not think Mr. Biden will be able to reverse. On Iran, even though he would like to reverse the getting out of the joint agreement, I don't think he will find it easy to reverse. And most difficult of all, domestic rift, the issues of race, the issues of class, the issues of division. I think that will be his greatest challenges. But on environment, I think in general, that will be his first and relatively easy win.
These are important issues. Let me bring in the other guest I have from the US. Taramzi Saab, you are listening to Dr. Adil Najam's assessment. I don't think anybody can disagree with whatever he has said. My question to you at this moment is, there are many challenges. And we haven't seen that kind of comprehensive plans regarding many things. For example, we kept on having this non-answer regarding court packing. Similarly, when it comes to various other issues, on economy also the program is there, but the major connectors are not there. And in healthcare, once again, single payer, is being rejected. So how do you actually walk the talk when your party doesn't have the control of the Congress, it doesn't have any influence over Supreme Court. How exactly are you going to chart these waters, sir?
So I think, look, I'll start with the Supreme Court. I think Biden never came out and said packing the court. And I don't think
But
Biden
he never
in his
denied
all
that
rush.
either.
No, I mean, look, people have said, Biden has always said that I'm not going to respond to that. And I think it was a right answer to do that because packing the Supreme Court, if Biden does that, then next president will pack it again if it's Republican. So I think that's a very slippery slope that the Democratic Party don't want to go to, at least Biden. I don't think you'll see that on the Biden packing the Supreme Court. I definitely agree with Professor Najam that I think a lot of things he says is very true. Now, one of the things is that we have a runoff election in January for the state of Georgia for 2 Senate seats, which is coming up because last night the Senate seat, you have to get 50% plus one, and it dropped down to 49.9% for the Republicans. So there is a runoff seat with 2 seats in January, I think, and that's where Democrats are looking now. That let's pick up a battle, Georgia, since it has gone blue. I think there is a hope that we can put really, really good concerted effort to take those 2 Senate seats in Georgia. And if we do that, then come January, we do have the control.
That's a good answer, sir. But with due respect, Ramzi sir, hope is not a policy, is it?
Well, look, Donald Trump 4 years been just hoping for better policies. So I would say that you're right. Hope is not a policy, but I think the challenges do lie, like Professor Najam said. I think the biggest challenge is going to be in next 4 years is immigration reform and criminal justice reform.
Okay, very quickly, one more question. What happens, what will be your party's reaction if Donald Trump refuses to concede and refuses to leave?
Well, I think one thing I love about our great nation is that we have institutions that are so solid that I don't care what Donald Trump says. I think we have built institutions. And this idea of that Donald Trump won't leave, transitioning started happening. What happens is just because when you're very close to election, both the administration and the campaigns start transitioning behind closed doors. So it's not openly disclosed, but transition starts happening 2 months before, because it's not like you win the election and then you get dumped with all the information. No, they have to start transitioning. Donald Trump can say whatever he wants to say, unfortunately, but we have the institutions that will make sure the transition happens smoothly.
Right. Let me come back to the studio. Ahmed Jawad Sahab, you're listening to these comments. If you want to add to something, please do. But let me also ask you, I remember when Donald Trump actually took oath of office, and there were these events where tables had to be bought, and many political parties from Pakistan was scurrying to get book their table. People's Party actually did $10,000 worth of a table, right? Now the question is, how are you going to actually reach out? Your party and your government are going to reach out to potential president-elect Joseph Biden?
Farooq, like you asked me to add anything, so first of all, I would like to add a few comments. For the last 5 years, the American public has been ridiculed and called ignorant nation because they have selected a president like Trump, who had been bullying the world, who had been insulting media and leadership.
They have been called ignorant by whom?
I mean, the general perception.
Have you taken survey of other countries?
No, I'm not quoting anyone. I mean, it is just a cliche, which is a perception or a cliche being used that the American nation is ignorant, and that is why a president like Trump could come out. But I think besides all the hype, besides all the aggressive campaign of Trump, I think the American nation has given their verdict, I think, quite wisely. I mean, they could see that this kind of attitude, whether it is domestic, whether it is international, is not reflecting America as a great nation. So perhaps this is one of the sentiment
I'm glad you actually cleared this thing up. Now, give me your answer.
Now, how government is going to react, I cannot.
No, reach out to them, not
I mean,
react.
It should be a usual, normal, official way.
Okay.
I don't think so that we need to rush whatever the foreign ministry normally greet and congratulate, or their diplomats have to participate. I think it should be that usual, nothing extraordinary, nothing different.
Right. Dr. Adil Najam, let me ask you once again, since we are talking about this moment in history, you can talk about anything that has been discussed so far, but let me also ask you, this perception that there is going to be another civil war, Boogaloo boys are out there, QAnon is out there are many such forces that keep on talking about these issues. Now the question right now is that how much of this is hype and how much of this is reality? Because we understand that on one side there might be this threat, but usually the threat peters out. Remember that day when Donald Trump was going to take over and ban all the Muslims from entering the US? Never happened. I mean, there was a Muslim ban, but it turned out to be those countries which were already on the list. So, do you think that there is a possibility that by the end of the day, Donald Trump is going to concede and he is going to actually leave in peace?
So, all of the above. I won't go into the Muslim ban because what has been done administratively is even maybe worse than the original idea. But I think you are right. All of the above in the following sense: if there is a good news, the good news is that this fear of violence and stores boarding up their windows didn't really pan out. In fact, it has been till now, and I hope it remains, generally peaceful. And even those sort of things we see on television are these small little demonstrations, and they aren't violent, and they're mostly asking for votes. So they're all in the realm of the reasonable. That's been the good news, and I hope it remains so. It's also a good news that despite sometimes what seemed like instigation, from especially Mr. Trump, but sometimes his sons and so on and so forth, people haven't reacted to it by going to the streets and throwing stones. So that's good. Second, I think you're also right. I think there will be a lot of noise. There will be fire. There will be fury, but not fire in terms of Mr. Trump. And eventually, I think people will have to persuade him if he loses. I don't think he will go, in with a big smile and hugging and like we have sometimes seen in the past. But I think the other Republicans will also gather around him and say, "Sir, it's time." Right? And we've kind of the Nixon-like moment. Nixon also didn't want to go, but that will.
I'm glad that you actually mentioned Nixon, because if you remember that in 1960 Nixon lost to John Kennedy, and after that, after 8 years, he actually ran for the office and he won. So is there a possibility that Donald Trump will run again in 2024?
So that's exactly what I'm coming to. I am not sure if he will run. These are two really aged men. One is 77. When he goes, he'll be 81. The other is 74. By the next election, he's 78. But he already has, these three kids he's been grooming who already sort of speak like princes of the realm. But I think the serious thing is the following. So I am hoping that we don't get the violence, but both parties now have some very serious thinking to do. I mean, the Democrats today should be relieved, but I can't imagine them being happy. They have a broken party themselves. And Republicans clearly have a broken party in the sense that you can see it in the statements. All the Republican leaders are trying to think, how closely should I be seen to be with Trump? On the one hand, many of them owe their election to Trump. On the other hand, they are looking at the next 4 years and the next 4 years after that. So I have been arguing that in some ways the US is pretending it has a two-party system. That's a joke. It's not. It's a four-party system, at least. There is Republican, in Urdu it would be Republican Tay, like noon. It would be Republican Tay, Republican Trump. There is a party of Trump. There is another Republican Party which had kind of surrendered to the Trump Party because the Trump Party was bringing in new voters. On the Democrat side, you are already seeing the split. You're already seeing from my former student Alexandria Cortez.
The progressive and the moderates.
Right. The progressives are saying, look, guys, we made you win this election. We might not be able to win the election ourselves, but you can't win it without us. And that is the
Right.
party of Sanders. So
Dr.
there
Saab,
will
since you have
be a
actually
party.
talked about these four-party system, I want to actually I want to ask you to look at another aspect. That is my profession, media, media's role. The way media has been actually covering President Trump. If you remember, 4 years ago, Fox used to do it, and everybody used to complain. But now it seems that these divides might be there in the country, but media is shining too much light on it. Do you think that media also needs to have some kind of introspection?
Well, I think media always needs introspection everywhere in the world, but on this one, yeah, I'm not sure I fully agree. I think
Okay.
amongst the bad things that have happened, especially by Mr. Trump, and unfortunately, it's also happening in other parts of the world, in many countries, including in Pakistan. I
Right.
think politicians have realized that media is easy to badmouth, and they therefore question the credibility of the institution whenever they don't agree with the message. And what that does is, we've seen this in the US election, we are seeing it elsewhere. When you totally discredit the media, then people, the citizen, has very few sources left to figure out right from wrong. I do not
Right.
think the media has been as biased as it has been made to be. I
Right.
think sort of the mistakes have been some. I do think actually the divide is greater in some ways. The media sort of in
No,
this,
sir,
because the
let me
media
actually
always believes you have
qualify
to
my
have both
point.
sides.
Sir, let me qualify my point. In Arizona, recount is going on, and there, there were peaceful supporters of Trump sitting outside praying for his success. And media started coloring it as if there were weapons, and since the state is open carry, at that time there was a possibility of violence. There wasn't any. So, this is an example of exaggeration, is it not?
So I think if there are exaggerations, they should always be. So I think so media is a big thing, right? So media has many institutions, as in our
Right.
country, as in every. But in general, I think the media in the US, the mainstream media, has been generally reasonable, gone out of its way to be equal, sometimes unfairly so, because they think every side needs a voice. Sometimes they don't really. But
Okay.
in general, my worry is that the institution of the media in any society needs to be respected, so that they can be, and they also need to be monitored. Now I
Okay.
give you Arizona, if you allow me. I
Right.
was on some channels in Pakistan, and they were beginning to call Arizona as having been won by Mr. Biden. This is 2 days ago, and I remember saying, "Hey, just a minute, the voting is still going on. What's
Yeah.
the rush?" And you see the same in the US. I think the reasonable mainstream established media has been much more careful,
Okay.
and I think it is social media and the sort of the ones who are trying to sort of break in. But I do think there is a introspection to be had everywhere.
Right, but strangely enough, when you look at the screens, there seems to be a lot of noise, and it seems that the signal is being lost in the noise. Let me go back to Trimzi Saab. Sir, since we are talking about media, and we have so far talked about liberal media, let me ask you about the conservative media, which seems to be growing in strength every day. Tucker Carlson now has a highest rated program, and Fox is one, then there is conservative media, then of course One American Network and umpteen others, right? How are you going to actually handle such kind of media? Because they are going to be very aggressive. Remember that day when President Obama actually wore a tan suit and media was all over it criticizing about it. So there's going to be a lot of difficulty in handling media, right?
So, you know what? I think you're right. Professor Najam is definitely right about, how media plays. But look, I also think that if you ask most American, they laugh about it that Fox made a big deal about that tan suit, and we say that was Obama's scandal, and
Yeah.
we joke about it. Because if you ask any sensible person, they will say no, that was a scandal that Fox News made. And I think it comes down to how many sensible people are out in United States. I think
Okay.
people on both sides are tired of media hyping some of the things up, like you mentioned, right? But at the same time, I think we forget that CNN was very critical of Obama as well. It's not something new that CNN is just
Okay.
critical of Trump.
Yeah.
Obama was like, you should look at the Ebola tapes of Obama era, and it was as bad because CNN was like, oh, this is like Katrina for Obama. They really painted a bad picture. But
Okay.
Obama wasn't going out there and saying, oh, this is fake news, this is media against me. I think that's media's job. Media's job to hold people accountable. Media's job is to really put the light on the news that's going on, sometimes
Yeah.
a little bit harsh than other times.
That's
But
a
I
fair
don't
point,
think
Taramzi
America
Saab.
is
But with due
biased.
respect, we are talking about post-truth society around the world, and I mean, whether you follow him or not, Alex Jones still has millions of listeners to his program, and
No,
amazingly,
absolutely. Look,
on the first
I think
debate night, he was claiming that Joseph Biden had actually been plumbed up. They had added more blood to his veins so that he can be energetic. So that
look,
kind of
again,
ridiculous,
you are
approach
right,
is
right?
going to
But
be
now
there.
what percentage of people buy into it? That's what it comes down to.
Yeah,
I
but
don't
millions
think
of
that
people actually follow
67
him.
million who voted for Trump buys into
Right,
it. I don't think
Taramzi Saab, I'm being told that we have to start, actually, we have to conclude the program very quickly. Do you see better age ushering in Pakistan-US relationship or worse?
the
In my
fact that
opinion,
Pakistanis will buy.
it might be better.
Okay.
Once there is a better absorption of dialogue, negotiations, listening to each other, I think there is more chance to improve the relationship and understanding.
Okay.
And regarding
But
the
institutional relationship rather than telephone diplomacy.
yes, institutional relationship is
Right.
more important for Pakistan
course
because
it
it is more long lasting.
Yeah.
And regarding this media, I think in every country there is a media which is serious, conservative, and there is a
I
media which
had
believes
sworn
in
that I'm not going to let you talk
sensation.
about media because
Sensation, thrill.
your department is media handling, so I'm not going to let you talk about that. In any case, I'm told that we have to conclude the program. Ahmed Jawad sir, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Dr. Adil Najam, thank you very much, sir, for your precious time. Taramzi Saab, thank you very much for being part of the program as well. Viewers, you have listened to our participants. One aspect that one has to actually highlight, and as a student of history, as a student of international relations and political science, when I study some politician, I study them very really in depth. While the media keeps on giving you this image of an angry man who's going to throw tantrums actually all the time, and that is the image of Donald Trump. There might be some truth to it, but the fact is that when it comes to the idea of pitting half of the country against the other half, or actually declaring a civil war or doing something of that sort, I don't think anybody of that stature would go to that breaking point. Remember, Donald Trump says that he loves his country, and he can always run in 2024. So that is on one side. It is my belief that things are going to progress in a better manner, as Ahmed Jawad Saab, I think, will also agree with me. But on the other side, let us hope in coming days we see that reassertion of the liberal world order where value-based system was also relevant. This is today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.